The alarm bells rang through the Coalition command center on Earth. Admiral Lisa Grant stood before the massive screen that showed red dots moving toward human space. Each red dot was a Zephyrian warship, and there were thousands of them. How many ships are we looking at? Grant asked her aide, Colonel Jake Morrison. Morrison checked his tablet. 3,000 combat vessels, Admiral. Maybe more. They've been building this fleet for years. Grant felt her stomach drop. The Coalition had only 800 ships in the entire sector. The Zephyrians had been planning this war for a long time. The year was 2387. Humans had joined the Galactic Coalition 200 years ago. Since then, they had been the peaceful members of the group. Other species saw humans as farmers and traders, not fighters. The Coalition used human ships to carry supplies and human workers to build space stations. Nobody thought of humans as warriors. That was exactly what humans wanted them to think. War Marshal Krikstar led the Zephyrian fleet. His species was known across the galaxy for their skill in battle. They had taken over 17 star systems. In the past 50 years, their plasma weapons could cut through any known armor. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and kill. Krikstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the star maps. His forearms moved quickly over the controls as he planned his attack. His yellow eyes glowed with excitement. The humans will fall in days, he told his officers. We have studied them for decades. They are weak. They avoid fights. They prefer to talk instead of shooting. His second-in-command, Submarshal Vexray, nodded. Our spies report that human military forces are small and outdated. They spend more money on hospitals than weapons. Krikstar made a sound that was like laughter for his species. Soon we will control their worlds. The Coalition will see what happens when they put farmers in charge of defense. Back on Earth, the Coalition Council met in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the Great Hall. The Altarians, with their blue skin, looked worried. The crystalline Vortons hummed nervously. The furry Keplerians were already talking about surrender. We must evacuate the outer colonies, said Council Leader Zarthul, an 8-foot-tall Altarian. The Zephyrian fleet is too strong. We cannot match their numbers. What about asking for help from the Andromedan Alliance? Suggested another. Member, they are too far away, Grant replied. The Zephyrians will reach our colonies in 3 days. Any help would arrive too late. The council members whispered among themselves in their various languages. Fear filled the room like a bad smell. Morrison leaned close to Grant. Admiral, there is one option we haven't discussed. Grant looked at him. She knew what he was thinking. For 50 years, it had been their most classified secret. Even she had hoped they would never need to use it. You mean him? She whispered. Morrison nodded. Protocol 7. Wake up General Kane. The name sent a chill through Grant. Marcus Kane was a legend, but not the kind of legend that people talked about in public. He was the ghost of Titan, the man who had ended the Centauri border wars. His methods had been so brutal that even human military leaders had been shocked. After the wars ended, Kane had volunteered to go into deep sleep. He said the galaxy didn't need soldiers like him anymore. The human government had agreed. They built a secret facility on the dark side of Earth's moon and put Kane in a cryopod that would keep him alive for centuries. The Council doesn't know about him, Grant said. The Council doesn't need to know, Morrison replied. This is a human military decision. Grant thought about the thousands of Zephyrian ships heading toward Earth. She thought about the colonies full of human families. She thought about children who would never grow up if the Zephyrians won. Send the order, she said quietly. Wake him up. Morrison typed commands into his secure tablet. Far away on the moon, machines that had been waiting for 50 years began. To work. Warning lights flashed in an empty facility. Automated systems checked and double-checked their programming. In a room deep underground, a metal chamber began to warm up. Inside the chamber, a man who had been sleeping for half a century slowly began to breathe again. His heart started beating faster. His brain waves began to show activity. General Marcus Kane was waking up. While this happened, the Zephyrian fleet continued toward human space. Crickstar felt confident about his victory. His intelligence reports said humans were peaceful traders. His spies had told him that human weapons were outdated. Everything he knew suggested this would be an easy conquest. He was wrong about everything. Coalition Council continued their meeting, trying to plan an evacuation that would save as many lives as possible. They did not know that Admiral Grant had just made a decision that would change everything. On the moon, in a facility that did not officially exist, Marcus Kane's eyes opened for the first time in 50 years. The first thing he saw was the date, display on the chamber wall. The second thing he saw was the red emergency light flashing. He sat up slowly, his muscles stiff from decades of sleep. His gray hair was longer than he remembered. His face was lined with old scars from battles fought long ago. A speaker crackled to life. "General Kane, this is Admiral Grant. We need you to save humanity." Kane stood up and stretched. His voice was rough from 50 years of silence. "Who woke me up?" he asked. "And who do I need to kill?" 2 hours later, General Marcus Kane stood in the briefing room of Coalition Command. He wore a simple black uniform that had no rank badges or decorations. His gray eyes studied the tactical displays, showing Zephyrian fleet movements. Colonel Jake Morrison stood beside him, looking older than Kane remembered. Morrison had been Kane's aide during the Centauri Wars. Now he had gray hair and deep lines around his eyes, but his back was still straight and his voice was still steady. "The Zephyrians took 12 colonies in the past week," Morrison explained. "They're moving fast. Their main fleet will reach the Mars defense grid in 48 hours. Kane nodded but said nothing. He watched the red dots on the screen move closer to Earth. Admiral Grant sat at the conference table with her senior staff. They all looked worried and tired. "General, we've prepared evacuation plans for the major population centers," Grant said. "We can save maybe 60% of Earth's civilians if we start now." Kane turned to look at her. His expression was calm, but something in his eyes made the room feel colder. "Cancel the evacuation," he said. Grant blinked. "Sir, I don't think you understand the situation. We're outnumbered 4-1. The Zephyrians have better weapons and more ships." "I understand perfectly," Kane replied. "Cancel the evacuation and activate Protocol 7. Morrison straightened. He had been waiting 50 years for those words. "Sir, Protocol 7 requires authorization from the Global Defense Council," said Captain Rachel Stone, Grant's intelligence officer. Kane looked at her for a long moment. Stone was young, maybe 30 years old. She had probably never seen real war. "Captain Stone, how long have you been in intelligence?" Kane asked. 8 years, sir." "Then you don't know what Protocol 7 actually is," Kane said. "Morrison, show her." Morrison walked to a wall panel and placed his hand on a scanner. The panel slid away, revealing a smaller room that had been hidden behind it. Inside the room were dozens of computer screens and communication equipment that looked more advanced than anything Stone had ever seen. For 200 years, every human who joined the coalition military has had 2 jobs, Morrison explained. The job everyone knows about and the real job. Kane walked into the hidden room. The screens came to life as he approached them. Maps appeared showing not just human space, but the entire galaxy. Thousands of small green dots were scattered across the star systems. "Each green dot is a human operative," Kane said. "Merchants, diplomats, researchers, aid workers. The galaxy thinks they know what humans do out there. They don't know anything. Stone followed them into the room, her mouth open in shock. How many operatives are there? 50,000 in Zephyrian space alone, Morrison answered. Another 100,000 spread throughout the galaxy. Every human civilian who travels beyond Earth's system is trained in intelligence gathering and sabotage. Kane sat down at the main console. His fingers moved quickly over the controls, typing commands that had been prepared decades ago. All across the galaxy, human operatives began receiving coded messages. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Dr. Helen Rodriguez was known as a peaceful agricultural researcher. She had spent 15 years helping Zephyrian farmers improve their crops. What the Zephyrians didn't know was that Helen had been mapping their entire food distribution system. She knew exactly which crops fed which cities, and which genetic modifications could make those crops poisonous to Zephyrians while remaining safe for other species. Helen received Kane's message while she was working in her laboratory. She read it twice, then walked to her storage room and began mixing chemicals that would destroy Zephyrian agriculture within days. In orbit around the Zephyrian military shipyard at Keth Volume, Captain Alex Parker commanded what appeared to be a cargo vessel. For 12 years, he had been delivering supplies to Zephyrian bases. His ship looked old and slow, but hidden inside its cargo bays were weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Parker got Kane's message while he was docked at the shipyard, loading what the Zephyrians thought were medical supplies. He smiled and began activating systems that had been waiting for this moment. Within hours, the most important Zephyrian military facility would be nothing but floating debris. Back on Earth, Kane continued typing commands. More screens lit up around the room, showing status reports from human operatives throughout Zephyrian space. Grant and her staff watched in amazement as they realized the scope of what humans had been doing for 2 centuries. "This is impossible," Stone whispered. "How did we keep this secret from the Coalition?" "Because aliens think they understand humans," Kane replied without looking up from his work. "They see us as peaceful farmers and traders. They never imagined that every farmer could be a soldier, every trader could be a spy." Admiral Grant leaned against the wall, trying to process what she was seeing. "General, this level of preparation... When did we start planning for this war?" Kane finally looked up from the console. "We started planning the day we joined the Coalition. Humans learned long ago that peace is only possible when you're prepared for war." Morrison handed Stone a tablet showing historical records that had been classified for 200 years. Every human colony ship carried military specialists. Every trade mission included intelligence officers. Every cultural exchange gathered information about alien weaknesses. Stone scrolled through the files, her face growing pale. "We've been studying them this whole time. Their psychology, their biology, their technology. Know your enemy, Kane," said the first rule of warfare. On the main screen, red warning lights began flashing across Zephyrian space. Communication networks were failing. Power grids were shutting down. Military bases were reporting mysterious explosions. War Marshal Crickstar received the first reports while his fleet was still 2 days from Earth. At first, he thought they were random accidents. Then the reports kept coming. Food supplies contaminated. Warships breaking down. Communication satellites going dark. What is happening? He demanded from his bridge. Sub-Marshal Vex Ree looked confused as she read the reports. "Sir, it appears to be coordinated sabotage, but our intelligence says humans have no assets in our territory." Crickstar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Find out who is doing this and kill them." But it was already too late. Across Zephyrian space, humans who had spent decades building trust and relationships were now using that access to destroy everything the Zephyrians needed to fight a war. Kane stood, up from the console and looked at the screen showing Zephyrian fleet positions. The red dots were still moving toward Earth, but now they were moving blind. Their communication with home was cut off. They had no idea that their entire civilization was falling apart behind them. "How long until they reach Earth?" Kane asked. 36 hours, Morrison replied. Kane nodded. "That's enough time. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 began at exactly 08:00 hours Earth Standard Time. Across human space, merchant vessels that had been carrying cargo for decades suddenly revealed their true nature. Hidden panels slid open to expose weapons that no alien species had ever seen before. What had appeared to be simple cargo ships transformed into warships that could outfight anything in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Alex Parker watched from his bridge as his cargo vessel changed into something that would give Zephyrian admirals nightmares. The ship's outer hull split apart, revealing sleek armor underneath. Weapon ports opened along the sides. The old engine signature disappeared as powerful military drives came online. "All systems green," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Nina Walsh. "We're ready for combat," Parker smiled. For 12 years, he had played the role of a simple cargo captain, delivering supplies and making small talk with Zephyrian dockworkers. All that time, he had been gathering intelligence and waiting for this moment. "Target the shipyard's main reactor," Parker ordered. "Let's give them a surprise they'll never forget." The Zephyrian shipyard at Kethvolume was one of their most important military facilities. It built the plasma cannons that made Zephyrian ships so dangerous. The yard's commanders thought they were safe, protected by energy shields and guarded by patrol ships. They were wrong. Parker's ship fired a single shot. The beam cut through the shipyard shields like they were made of paper. The reactor exploded, taking half the facility with it. Within seconds, the Zephyrians lost their ability to build new weapons. Similar attacks happened across Zephyrian space. Human operatives who had spent decades in deep cover began their work. Dr. Helen Rodriguez released biological agents that targeted Zephyrian food crops. The agents were harmless to other species, but deadly to anything Zephyrians could eat. Commander Chris Allen led a team of researchers who had been studying Zephyrian computer systems for 20 years. They activated virus programs that shut down military networks across 3-star systems. Zephyrian commanders found themselves unable to communicate with their own ships. On Earth, General Kane watched the reports come in from across the galaxy. Each success was marked by a green light on his tactical display. Within 6 hours, critical Zephyrian infrastructure was either destroyed or under human control. Captain Rachel Stone studied the intelligence reports with growing amazement. "General, how did we know exactly where to hit them? These targets are perfectly chosen." Kane pointed to a wall covered with psychological profiles of Zephyrian leaders. "We've been studying them for 200 years, Captain. We know how they think, how they fight, what scares them most." The profiles showed detailed information about every important Zephyrian military officer, their family backgrounds, their fears, their weaknesses. Major Kelly Johnson had spent her entire career building these files, interviewing human operatives who had lived among Zephyrians for decades. "War Marshal Crickstar is overconfident," Johnson explained to Stone. "He believes his species is naturally superior in combat. He's never lost a battle, so he doesn't know how to react when things go wrong. Sub-Marshal Vexery is his weakness," Morrison added. "She's his daughter. If she's threatened, he'll make emotional decisions instead of tactical ones." Kane nodded. "Humans understand something that most alien species don't. War isn't just about ships and weapons. It's about psychology. Fear is more powerful than any plasma cannon." The Zephyrian invasion fleet was still heading toward Earth, but strange. Things were beginning to happen. Ships reported navigation errors that led them into asteroid fields. Communication systems played recordings of human voices, speaking perfect Zephyrian, giving false orders. Some ships received messages that appeared to come from their home worlds, telling them their families were dead. War Marshal Krickstar stood on his bridge, trying to understand what was happening to his fleet. 3 of his ships had been destroyed by what appeared to be random accidents. 2 more had turned around and headed home after receiving fake recall orders. "The humans are doing this," he told Vexri. "Somehow they're sabotaging us." Vexri looked confused. "Father, our intelligence reports say humans have no assets in our space. They're farmers and traders, not spies." "Then our intelligence is wrong," Krickstar growled. He activated the fleet's long-range communicator to call home for reinforcements. The communicator was dead. Every attempt to contact Zephyrian command failed. What Krickstar didn't know was that human operatives had been slowly replacing key personnel in Zephyrian communications networks for decades. The beings he thought were loyal Zephyrian technicians were actually humans using advanced disguise technology. Captain Ryan Brooks commanded one of these technicians. He looked exactly like a Zephyrian, complete with yellow eyes and forearms. The disguise was so perfect that he had worked in Zephyrian military command for 15 years without being discovered. When Krickstar tried to call for help, Brooks made sure the messages never got through. Instead, he sent false reports to Zephyrian High Command, telling them the invasion was going perfectly and no additional forces were needed. Back on Earth, Kane activated the next phase of his plan. Hidden throughout human space were automated weapon platforms disguised as space debris. They had been placed over decades by human cleanup crews who claimed to be removing old satellites and asteroid mining equipment. The platforms were invisible to most sensors and completely harmless until activated. Now Kane brought them online, creating a trap that covered every major space route in the solar system. Admiral Grant watched the tactical display as thousands of weapon platforms revealed themselves. "My God, General, how long have you been preparing?" "This? Since the day humans joined the coalition," Kane replied. "Every generation of human leadership has added to the plan. We hoped we'd never need it, but we were ready just in case." The platforms formed a web of death around Earth's solar system. Any ship trying to approach would have to run through a gauntlet of automated weapons. But Kane had a better plan than just destroying the Zephyrian fleet. "We're not going to kill them all," he told his staff. "That would be wasteful. We're going to capture their leaders and break their will to fight." Morrison brought up a new display showing the Zephyrian fleet's formation. Krickstar's flagship is here, in the center of their formation. If we can take him alive, the rest will surrender. Kane studied the display. The Zephyrian formation was exactly what he had expected. They were following standard tactics, which meant they were predictable. "They're flying into our trap," Kane sighed. "In 12 hours, this war will be over." Major Kelly Johnson looked worried. "General, what if they decide to fight to the death? Zephyrians value honor above survival." Kane smiled for the first time since waking up. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Captain Johnson, Zephyrians think they know what honor means. They're about to learn the difference between honor and stupidity." The trap closed around the Zephyrian fleet like the jaws of a giant predator. War Marshal Krickstar realized something was wrong when his navigation officer reported strange readings from the space around them. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures," the officer said, his 4 hands working quickly over the controls. "They weren't there an hour ago." Krickstar moved to the sensor station. The display showed thousands of small objects surrounding his fleet. They had appeared as if from nowhere, floating in space like deadly flowers blooming in the dark. "What are those things?" he demanded. Before anyone could answer, the objects began to fire. Streams of energy lanced through space, striking Zephyrian ships with deadly accuracy. The weapons were unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. They cut through Zephyrian armor like it was made of thin metal. On Earth, General Kane watched the battle from his command center. The hidden weapon platforms were performing exactly as designed. Each platform could destroy a ship 10 times its size, and there were thousands of them. "Status report," Kane ordered. Colonel Morrison checked his displays. 17 Zephyrian ships destroyed. The rest are trying to break formation and escape, but they're flying into the next layer of platforms. Kane had planned this trap over decades. The weapon platforms were arranged in multiple layers around the solar system. If enemy ships tried to advance, they would face heavy fire. If they tried to retreat, they would face even more weapons. Captain Ryan Brooks was still aboard the Zephyrian command station, disguised as a technician. He watched Zephyrian officers panic as their ships died around them. Then he activated the final part of his mission. Brooks had spent 15 years learning the Zephyrian computer systems. He knew every password, every security code, every weakness in their networks. Now he used that knowledge to take control of their own ships. Suddenly, Zephyrian vessels began turning their weapons on each other. Friend fired on friend as Brooks sent false targeting data to their weapon systems. The Zephyrian fleet tore itself apart in confusion and terror. War Marshal Crix Tar watched his carefully planned invasion become a nightmare. Half his ships were destroyed or disabled. The others were scattered across space, unable to communicate with each other or coordinate their attacks. "How are they doing this?" he roared at his staff. "How are the humans controlling our ships?" Sub-Marshal Vexray looked pale, which was difficult for a Zephyrian. "Father, I think we underestimated them. Badly." That was when Kane made his move. The U's vengeance appeared on Zephyrian sensors, like a ghost materializing from the void. The ship had been invisible, hidden by technology that made it undetectable to any known sensor system. The vengeance was nothing, like the peaceful ship's aliens associated with humans. It was a predator built for one purpose: to kill other ships. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets. Its armor could withstand anything the Zephyrians could throw at it. Kane stood on the bridge of his ship, wearing the black uniform of the Ghost Fleet. These were the ships that didn't officially exist, crewed by soldiers who had never been born. According to public records, "Target the Zephyrian flagship," Kane ordered. "Weapons at minimum power. I want them disabled, not destroyed." Commander Nina Walsh, his weapons officer, looked confused. "Sir, we could destroy them with one shot. Why hold back?" Kane smiled coldly. "Because dead enemies can't surrender, Commander. And I want Crickstar to surrender." The Vengeance fired a single beam at the Zephyrian flagship. The shot was precisely calculated to disable their engines and weapons without destroying the ship. Crickstar's vessel went dark, floating helplessly in space. Across the battlefield, other human ships revealed themselves. They had been hidden throughout the solar system, waiting for this moment. What the Zephyrians had thought was a simple merchant fleet was actually the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Captain Alex Parker's ship joined the attack, along with dozens of others. Each vessel looked different from standard human designs because they had been built in secret, using technology that the Coalition didn't know existed. The Zephyrian fleet tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Their ships were outgunned, outnumbered, and completely outmatched. Worse, they couldn't trust their own systems because humans had been sabotaging them for years. Admiral Lisa Grant watched the battle from Earth, amazed by what she was seeing. "General Kane, your fleet is incredible. How did we build ships like this without anyone knowing?" Kane's voice came through the communicator from his flagship. Every human mining operation, every research station, every cargo run has been covered from military construction. We've been building this fleet for 200 years. Major Kelly Johnson brought up displays showing human military facilities hidden throughout the solar system. Secret shipyards built inside asteroids. Weapon factories disguised as research. Stations, training facilities that supposedly studied agriculture but actually produced the deadliest soldiers in the galaxy. The entire human civilian infrastructure has been a military operation, Johnson explained. Every human who left Earth has been part of it. The Zephyrian resistance collapsed within hours. Ship after ship surrendered as their crews realized they were facing an enemy they couldn't hope to defeat. The humans didn't just have better weapons and ships. They had been planning this war since before most Zephyrians were born. War Marshal Krikstar found himself trapped on his disabled flagship, with his daughter and a handful of loyal officers. Outside, human ships surrounded them like hunters closing in on wounded prey. Then something impossible happened. A human voice spoke to them in perfect Zephyrian, using words and phrases that only native speakers would know. War Marshal Krikstar. The voice said, "This is General Marcus Kane of the Human Defense Force. You have 1 minute to decide whether your species lives or dies." Krikstar looked at his communications officer, a loyal soldier who had served his family for decades. The officer's yellow eyes met his, and Krikstar saw something there that made his blood freeze. The officer smiled, and when he spoke, his voice was human. "Hello, Krikstar," said Captain Chris Allen, removing his disguise mask. "I've been waiting 20 years for this conversation." Krikstar realized that humans had been among them all along. People he had trusted, officers he had promoted, technicians who had access to his most secret facilities. They had all been human spies. His daughter Vexrai stared at Allen in shock. "But you've served our family since I was a child. You taught me to fly. You were at my graduation ceremony." Allen nodded sadly. "And I'm genuinely sorry about that, Vexrai. You're a good person. Unfortunately, your father chose to make war on the wrong species." Kane's voice came through the communicator. "Again, your minute is almost up, Krikstar. What's it going to be?" 6 hours and 17 minutes after General Marcus Kane had awakened from his 50-year sleep, the Zephyrian invasion was over. Not defeated, not retreated, but completely and utterly destroyed as a fighting force. War Marshal Krikstar sat in the detention cell aboard the UE's Vengeance, staring at the walls that held him prisoner. His yellow eyes had lost their fierce glow. His forearms hung limply at his sides. In 6 hours, everything he had believed about warfare, about his species, about the galaxy itself, had been proven wrong. The door to his cell opened, and General Kane walked in. He looked older than Krikstar had expected, with gray hair and lines around his eyes. But there was something in those gray eyes that made the Zephyrian general understand why humans called this man the Ghost of Titan. "You wanted to see the human homeworld," Kane said, sitting down across from Krikstar. "Congratulations. You made it to Earth. Just not the way you planned." Krikstar found his voice after several moments. "How long have you been planning this?" 237 years, Kane replied calmly. "Since the day humans joined the coalition. We knew that someday someone would see us as weak and try to conquer us. We've been preparing for that day ever since." Kane activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy. Thousands of green dots marked human assets throughout space. Krikstar stared at the display in growing horror as he realized the scope of what humans had accomplished. Every human trader who ever visited your worlds was gathering intelligence, Kane explained. Every cultural exchange, every diplomatic mission, every research project was part of our preparation. We know everything about your species, Krikstar. Your biology, your psychology, your military doctrine, your weaknesses. The display zoomed in on Zephyrian space. Red indicators showed the damage that human operatives had caused in the past day. Food production centers destroyed. Military communications down. Government officials missing. The entire Zephyrian Empire was falling apart. Your civilization will collapse within weeks, Kane continued, unless you accept my terms. Krikstar felt something he had never experienced before, complete and total defeat. What do you want? Kane leaned forward. I want you to understand something important. Humans are not warriors because we enjoy fighting. We are warriors because we choose when to stop fighting. Today, I'm choosing to let your species live. The general stood up and walked to the wall display. It now showed the Zephyrian homeworld, where human operatives controlled every major system. I could order the destruction of every Zephyrian world right now, Kane said quietly. My people are in position to do it. Your food supplies are poisoned. Your power grids are compromised. Your military command structure has been infiltrated for decades. If I wanted your species extinct, you would all be dead by tomorrow. Krikstar felt his heart's beating fast. But you won't do it. No, Kane agreed, because that would be wasteful. And humans don't waste resources. Kane sat back down and looked directly into Krikstar. Here are my terms. You will order all Zephyrian military forces to surrender immediately. Your government will formally apologize to the coalition and pay reparations for the damage you've caused. Your military leaders will go into exile on worlds of my choosing. And if we refuse? Krikstar asked. Kane's expression didn't change. Then there won't be any Zephyrians left to refuse anything. The door opened, and Colonel Morrison entered with Captain Rachel Stone. Stone carried a tablet showing real-time intelligence from Zephyrian space. General, we're receiving surrender signals from Zephyrian fleets throughout the galaxy, Stone reported. Once word spread about what happened here, their commanders gave up without fighting. Morrison added, Dr. Rodriguez reports that Zephyrian agricultural systems will be back online within days if they cooperate. If they don't cooperate, their entire population will starve within weeks. Kane nodded. And Captain Allen's status? He's been extracted from Zephyrian Command, along with our other deep cover operatives, Morrison said. 20 years of preparation paid off perfectly. Krikstar listened to this conversation with growing despair. The humans weren't just winning. The war, they had already won it before it started. Every move his species had made had been anticipated and countered. How did you know we would attack? He asked. Kane smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Because we made you attack. For 50 years, human operatives have been feeding information to Zephyrian intelligence. Information that made you think we were weak and unprepared. We wanted you to see us as easy targets. Stone pulled up psychological profiles on her tablet. We studied your species' expansion patterns. You always attack civilizations you think are weaker than you. So we made sure you thought humans were weak. Every trade dispute, every diplomatic incident, every sign of human weakness was carefully planned, Morrison explained. We needed you confident enough to commit your entire military to attacking us. Kane stood up again. Because the only way to end this threat permanently was to destroy your military capability completely. If we had just defended ourselves, you would have retreated and tried again later. This way, you have no military left to threaten anyone. The full scope of human planning became clear to Krikstar. His species hadn't just been defeated in battle. They had been manipulated for decades into making exactly the mistakes humans wanted them to make. You're monsters, he whispered. Kane's expression softened slightly. No, Krikstar, we're gardeners. We prefer to grow things rather than destroy them. But when someone threatens our garden, we remember how to be predators. A new voice came through the ship's communication system. It was Admiral Grant speaking. From Earth. General Kane, the Coalition Council is demanding a full briefing on human military capabilities. They want to know why we didn't tell them about our true strength. Kane picked up the communicator. Tell the Council that human military doctrine is classified at the highest levels. If they want details, they can submit a formal request through proper channels. He turned back to Crickstar. You have 1 hour to contact your government and order a complete surrender. If you refuse, I'll simply replace your government with humans who look exactly like Zephyrians. Your people will never know the difference. Crickstar felt his last hope die. You would enslave our entire species? Not enslave, Kane corrected. Manage, until you learn to be peaceful neighbors instead of galactic bullies. The Zephyrian leader looked at the floor for a long moment. Then he looked back up at Kane. I'll give the order. Kane nodded. Smart choice. Your daughter will be released unharmed, and your species will survive. In a few generations, this will all be ancient history. As Crickstar was led away to make his surrender broadcast, Kane stood alone in the cell for a moment. Morrison returned and found him staring out the viewport at Earth. Any regrets, General? Morrison asked. Kane was quiet for several seconds. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret the outcome. Morrison checked his watch. 6 hours and 23 minutes from wake-up to complete victory. That might be a record. Kane walked toward the door. Let's hope it's a record that never needs to be broken. As news of the Zephyrian surrender spread throughout the galaxy, the Coalition Council sat in stunned silence. Every species now understood that humans were not the peaceful farmers they appeared to be. They were apex predators who had chosen to be gardeners. But they had never forgotten how to hunt. General Marcus Kane returned to his cryochamber on the lunar facility 3 days later. Before going back to sleep, he updated his personal log for the last time. War lasted 6 hours. Peace resumed immediately. Human military doctrine remains effective. Next awakening scheduled only if humanity faces extinction-level threat. Until then, let them think we're just farmers and traders. It's safer for everyone that way. Kane closed his eyes and returned to his 50-year sleep. Around the galaxy, human operatives went back to their cover identities as merchants and researchers and diplomats. The most powerful military force in galactic history became invisible once again, and peace lasted for another 200 years.